Statelessness is a reality that presents many problems in the world today. There are quite a number of people that do not have a nationality.
I'm a South African, but I'm not recognized in South Africa. I told them I know my roots, but they said, where are my roots? So I couldn't explain to them.
Do not have this link with the state, with the country where they were born, with the country where they are living.
If a police comes across me and say, hey, man, can you show me your identities? If I show them this, they say, we don't know this. This is what it is. You know, they end up arresting me.
That lack of a link blocks the whole series of other rights.
Lawyers for Human Rights started up a statelessness project in March of 2011, and the reason we started up this statelessness project was that we'd started to identify significant numbers of people who've been unable to access nationality documents from their countries of origin. This was primarily around the Zimbabwe documentation process, which was run in late 2010 by the Department of Home Affairs in order to regularize the status of Zimbabwean nationals living in South Africa. The Zimbabwean immigration laws state that you may only hold Zimbabwean nationality. Holding dual nationality is not allowed, so that if somebody, for instance, has one parent who is non-Zimbabwean, in order for that person to access their Zimbabwean citizenship, they would formally need to renounce the citizenship of that other parent. Even if they have never held that citizenship, they would need to go to the embassy of that foreign country and formally renounce that citizenship before they would be able to claim Zimbabwean citizenship.
The problem in the Zimbabwean context is that they interpret the prohibition to mean not only that someone is prohibited from actually holding a second citizenship, they're prohibited even if there's a suspicion that they may have a claim to a foreign citizenship. The second real problem that there is with the prohibition on dual citizenship in Zimbabwe is that when it was implemented in 2001, there was a 6-month time period placed on this prohibition. And anyone who didn't comply with the law in that 6-month time period, meaning anyone who didn't go to their consular authority of the citizenship they may have a claim to and renounce that second citizenship, automatically lost their citizenship. So anyone who is born to a foreign parent in Zimbabwe who didn't renounce their claim to a second citizenship within that 6-month period is now stateless.
Grew up in Zimbabwe and then went to school in Zimbabwe. During this Zimbabwe documentation program, my employer actually felt that you must have some passports. All the workers that were working for him, when I went there and talked to the Zimbabwean Home Affairs officials, they told me, okay, can we have a look at your birth certificate? When I showed them my long birth certificate, they said, no, we're sorry, you are not a Zimbabwean citizen. The law changed in 2001. So first, so you lost your citizenship. My father was from Zambia and my mother was a Malawian. So that affected me. So the law said if either of the parents are not Zimbabweans, then I'm not a Zimbabwean citizen. Like at the moment I'm desperate, I don't actually know. I don't even, I'm failing to support my kids in Zimbabwe. You see, because I don't know how to go about it or how I can help my kids with everything. Actually, I'm failing.
looking at Zimbabwean children, in order for a Zimbabwean child to apply for any kind of document, they need to be assisted by a parent or guardian. If the child is unaccompanied, it's impossible for them to apply for a birth certificate or an ID document or passport. And if they are in South Africa for a number of years without the assistance of a parent or guardian, they're unable to prove their citizenship. No country will take responsibility for them, and they have a lot of difficulty in trying to access state services like health and education.
Each and every child is entitled to a birth registration, in the sense that every child is entitled to an identity, and also the birth registration give a child a sense of belonging and a sense of identity. So all the children are entitled to birth registration. It's through birth registration that children can also access essential services. So without proper documentation, one, these children cannot access education. There are some children who came here because they want to get job, but because they don't have proper documentation, they can't get proper work, or sometimes they end up being subjected to child labor or exploitation. It takes their sense of belonging, it reduces their self-esteem, and as a result, they end up being traumatized, depressed, and opt for other things that are not healthy for them to earn income. Some are pushed to live and work on the street because they become hopeless. They can't access essential services. So really, without documentation, the life of unaccompanied migrant children becomes a hell and becomes very difficult for them.
I came here in 2006. I'm sitting inside here with another guy. I don't know if I because my mother didn't take me to, because my mother didn't take me to the birth certificate. And my mother and my father was saying straight end of month to take me to a birth certificate.
South African Home Affairs has a situation where a person whose birth has never been registered may apply for something called late birth registration. So even if you are in your 20s or 30s or even 50s, you may still apply to have your birth registered, and you can obtain a birth certificate. The birth certificate is the founding document to any kind of proof of nationality, and this is true for any country. Without a birth certificate, you're unable to prove who you are and what your nationality is, and that is an essential document for any person.
We're at the women's shelter in Messina now. There are a lot of children here that don't have any birth record or any documentation, or are born to undocumented mothers. A lot of them live trans-border lives, and there's a lot of unregulated migration that goes on between Messina, so this region of South Africa, and Zimbabwe, because we're about 18 kilometers from the border, so people can walk across or swim through the river, and they don't necessarily get papers to regularize their stay here, and they don't register the birth of the children that get born here. So a lot of the children here are at huge risk of statelessness, which is why it's one of my focus points here in Messina for our work in the reduction of statelessness.
The women are coming with the children in the shelter. They are different in numbers. Another day it's 100 and something, another day it's 60, 70, 80. They are coming when they are still pregnant. Then they attend the clinic until they give birth. After birth, they come at the shelter. Until the babies grow of 4 months or 5 months, then they go to the farms. Rose came here and then she explained what they're supposed to do. Sometimes she fetched the women to the Home Affairs to help them to get the birth certificate.
Hello, Memory.
Hello.
My name is Rose. I'm from Lawyers for Human Rights. And I see that you have a maternity certificate, which is really good. What we need when we go to Home Affairs is a maternity certificate like that. I'm very glad to see you've got it stamped. And your asylum. So what we're going to do now is go to the local Department of Home Affairs. We're going to get a handwritten birth certificate for you for your child. Okay. We're about to go into Home Affairs, and we're going to get a handwritten birth certificate because that's what they issue to foreign mothers. And the handwritten birth certificates, it'll just show that the child was born in South Africa to the mothers that we have here. So I hope they accept our paperwork and issue our certificates without a problem. The problem with the right to birth registration in South Africa is that unfortunately the Department of Home Affairs does not uniformly implement the right to birth registration when it comes to children of foreign parents.
South Africa and other African nations can prevent statelessness, and one way to prevent statelessness is by universal birth registration.
Birth registration is the state's acknowledgement of a child's legal existence. And what it does is it pins the child's identity not only to their name and their parents, but it pins them to a birthplace.
If South Africa, in collaboration with other SADC or even other African countries, could come up with the situation of universal birth registration, this would go a very long way to protect individuals from statelessness. Mozambique had a civil war running in their country for several years. The civil war has been over for a number of years already, but during the civil war, the situation of civil registration was very poor, and it's resulted in a number of people not having their births registered or not having the births of their parents registered, so that they're unable to now prove their Mozambican citizenship.
There is a problem of civil registry in the country. Mozambique has requested UNHCR to assist to address this problem. We came clearly together to the conclusion that there was quite a lot of the fact of the statelessness, and there is a number of persons of Mozambican background that could be at risk of de jure statelessness.
Mozambique is a wonderful example of government taking initiative and getting involved in actually registering people as citizens and taking someone who was previously stateless and invisible in front of the state and making them an active participant in society. Recently, in partnership with government, UNHCR has started to map groups in Manica province on the border to Zimbabwe to find out the extent of the issue. Just last year, in 2010, UNHCR supported several non-profit organizations in an initiative in Roseno Garcia on the border to South Africa.
We have had different issues related to people who are here but lived in South Africa for many years because of the war, and they were deported and they don't have documents, not from Mozambique and not documents from South Africa. We try to go to some village and find out how many people in this situation, and we are still in the process of putting together the number so we can know exactly of how many people we are talking about. My parents died when I was very young, and that's why it took me so long for me to get the ID. We have people who are over 40 or 50 years who have not had any documents in their lives. People who have been to South Africa and who have been to other parts but without documents. So one of the reasons why our project exists is exactly to help these people getting their documents. And we even get people who are 70 years old who have not had any documentation, and we have helped about 300 people with the government's support.
I feel great, I feel happy because I didn't have a birth certificate, and the project helped me to have the birth certificate, and I now have the birth certificate.
I have the birth certificate now, but my struggle is to get the ID, because if I have an ID, it's easy for me to improve my life.
One reason the Mozambican example is good for other countries is there's always a question of, well, how can we just go register people who have no proof of who they are? How do we believe them? And in Mozambique, they have used a system of witnesses to vouch for a person's background and history, and to help the government feel more confident that they actually are citizens.
Mostly we get witnesses. People in a certain community will know that this or such person was born here, lives here. It's about 40 years or 50 years, and they don't have any documentation. So we get these witnesses from the communities to the government authorities, and from there they are given the birth certificates or documentation. There's an expression of happiness, an expression of gratitude, an expression where people feel like they have a certain value in society. Not just in terms of money, but in terms of values. The person will know that at least now I am somebody. I can die in peace and be recognized by the local authorities.
It's not really something that people are aware of, how deeply traumatized an individual can become by not having this kind of nationality and recognition by a state. Citizenship is the core right that leads on to other rights.
It is always taking like indefinite time for it to be solved. And that means the more time I waste, the more my future is going to be distorted. Because the time I've already wasted will never come back. I can look for a job, I can go to school. Nothing I can do, absolutely. It looks like I'm useless. Yet I'm not useless. I am fully equipped with my hands. I'm not disabled. But because of the papers, I'm more than a disabled person.
Essentially, you have become an invisible person with no rights and no ability to try to access those rights. It's the defining right of an individual, and it defines what other rights you are entitled to. So if somebody does not have citizenship or an identity, they are essentially without rights and without the protection of a state.